The cameras may have been rolling for pomp and pageantry, but they also captured something far more disturbing. A mother not nurturing her children, but scolding them with a look that could cut glass. Yes, we're talking about Kate Middleton and her cold, commanding glare toward Princess Charlotte and Prince George. While the royalists will predictably defend this with phrases like discipline or royal composure, let's call it what it really was: emotional rigidity cloaked in tradition. In that moment, Kate wasn't showing maternal warmth. She was performing, managing the optics. She wasn't comforting her children. She was correcting them like little props in a national photo op. And it wasn't subtle. Her lips were tight, her eyes sharp, her posture rigid. Not the signs of a loving mother, but a royal handler demanding perfection from two clearly overwhelmed children. The mask fell off. Let's not forget, these are kids, real kids, not military recruits. They're standing for hours in formal attire, under the gaze of thousands, and instead of kindness, they're getting the ice-cold look of royal protocol. What kind of childhood is that? And where's the compassion from the so-called future queen? Isn't this the same Kate Middleton the press constantly hails as the caring mother, the modern royal, the relatable woman? Where was that empathy on the balcony? Because all we saw was a woman more worried about public optics than her children's comfort. A woman so invested in projecting the perfect royal image that she forgot what it means to be human. Let's be honest, if Meghan had done that to Archie or Lilibet, the UK media would have erupted. But when Kate does it, crickets. In fact, worse than crickets, the tabloids praise her for keeping the children in line. This isn't parenting, it's performance. And frankly, it's disturbing. There's a strange, haunting stillness behind their expressions. As you can see, the children are not happy. Not the kind you see in a well-behaved child, but the kind that comes from being trained, not guided, not nurtured, trained. These royal kids, George, Charlotte, and Louis, aren't just living their childhoods, they're surviving them. And I say that not with judgment, but with concern. What we're watching unfold in real time is the quiet suffocation of childhood under a very old and very cold institution, one that values appearance over authenticity, perfection over play, composure over comfort. And that's the real tragedy here. Because behind every glossy magazine spread, behind every proud moment paraded on the palace balcony, there's a child who didn't choose any of this. They didn't ask for titles, they didn't ask to be symbols, and they certainly didn't ask to be dissected, criticized, and mocked for the slightest misstep, all before they even hit puberty. Think about that. Imagine being 7 years old and having your posture analyzed by grown adults on television. Imagine being 10 and your facial expressions turned into memes. Imagine being expected to smile while you're exhausted, to wave when you just want to hide. That's not just unfair, it's inhumane. But the press doesn't talk about that. The headlines are too busy fawning over future king charm and princess poise. They romanticize the discipline. They glorify the restraint. But we see through it, don't we? We see the way their shoulders slump when they think no one's looking. We see the tight jawlines, the forced half-smiles, the brief eye rolls that vanish as quickly as they came. That's not misbehavior. That's a silent protest, a cry for breathing room. And what's heartbreaking is the fact that we've seen this before. This isn't a new story, it's history repeating itself. Charles was raised with cold duty. Diana paid the price for daring to show emotion. William was molded, not nurtured. Harry, well, we all saw what happened when he broke free. And now we're watching it happen again, this time to 3 young children who deserve more than a script. Let's be clear, this isn't about blaming William and Kate personally. They're playing the roles they were handed, upholding a system they were born into. But at some point, someone has to say, enough. Because these kids are more than future heirs. They're people. And people need love, spontaneity, privacy, mess, space to be flawed without punishment. Let's contrast that for a moment. Across the ocean, there's a very different picture playing out. Harry and Meghan's children, Archie and Lilibet, are growing up far from the royal spotlight. No balcony waves, no public scolding, no staged smiles, just life. Messy, quiet, real life. They're allowed to be goofy, to have off days, to cry without being shamed, to dance without being dissected by pundits. And isn't that what childhood should be? Some call it rebellion, I call it sanity. It's not about rejecting heritage, it's about prioritizing humanity. While the British media paints Meghan as a villain for protecting her children's privacy, what she's actually doing is giving them the greatest gift of all, the freedom to just be. And the British public, well, many of them at least, are beginning to notice the contrast. Because on one side, you have these carefully polished heirs walking in tight, restrictive shoes. On the other, there are barefoot kids running through a yard, just laughing with their parents. And you really have to ask yourself, which one looks healthier? The problem is, this royal cycle is self-perpetuating. Each generation teaches the next how to bottle emotions, how to prioritize duty over joy, and by the time they realize what they've lost, it's honestly too late. The damage is done. But this generation doesn't have to repeat that. There's still a window, you know, a chance to change course, to stop forcing children to represent a system before they've even learned who they are as individuals. Because no child should have to earn affection through composure. No child should be scolded for needing space. No child should be afraid of being imperfect. What if, just once, we saw a royal child fidget and everyone said, "That's okay"? What if a yawn wasn't labeled disrespectful but normal? What if Charlotte wanted to wear sneakers instead of ballet flats and it didn't become a headline? The palace might think such changes are small, but they'd be seismic. We don't need more royal robots. We need emotionally healthy human beings, adults who grow up knowing how to express, not suppress. That starts now. It starts with recognizing that George, Charlotte, and Louis are not ornaments. They're not chess pieces. They're not walking PR campaigns. They're kids. And the most tragic thing is that even the small signs of rebellion, the frown, the slouch, the wandering gaze, those are punished, not embraced. But kids are supposed to rebel. That's how they discover themselves. That's how they learn. And when that process is stifled, you don't get stronger adults. You get broken ones. Look at history. Look at the emotional toll this institution has taken on its own. Look at the therapy, the scandals, the quiet breakdowns behind palace walls. And now look at these kids. Do you really want that for them? Or do you want something better? Something that looks less like royalty and more like reality, less like legacy and more like love. And maybe that starts with simple acts. Let them skip a photo op. Let them say no to a public appearance. Let them cry and not be corrected. Let them be children. Because one day, these children will grow up, and they will remember how they were treated. They will carry it with them, the weight, the expectations, the fear of not being perfect. Or if we're lucky, if someone is brave enough to change the script, they'll carry something lighter. Joy, confidence, the memory of parents who chose their well-being over protocol. It's easy to blame the institution, but real change begins with real choices, less about who inherits the throne, more about who inherits freedom. And let's not kid ourselves. The world is watching, not for pomp and ceremony, but for authenticity. And honestly, the most powerful thing this family could ever do right now is choose their children over the crown. That's not weakness, that's leadership, that's not disloyalty, that's love. Because being royal shouldn't mean giving up your humanity, and it certainly shouldn't mean forcing your kids to do it either. So here's the message. Let them be wild, let them be weird, let them be wrong, let them be real. Because that's where the future begins. Not with titles or traditions, but with truth. And if the royal family wants to survive another generation, it might be time to put the crown down, for just a moment, and pick up something far more valuable. A hug, a joke, a bedtime story, a real connection. Thank you for listening, thank you for caring, and thank you for standing up for every child who deserves more than a perfect photo. Because real royalty, it's not about ruling. It's about loving without conditions.